So I want to welcome everyone to the Africa Game Jam workshop. We started last week and we got a good response. So this week the response is a bit low, but at least we have a number of people that are part and participating, and hopefully others will jump on later. So today's workshop, anyway, by the way, let me introduce myself. My name is Tutaleni Ilonga. I'm a game designer. I have my own company, and which is involved with gaming and comic books and stuff. It's newly established, so when you're in the market. So today we'll be hosting. A workshop for you guys about storytelling and game concepts. So let me see if I shared my screen with you guys. So I think I shared my screen with you guys, and can you guys see what I shared on? If anyone can't see, just let me know.
Can see.
Okay, so it's game design and storytelling workshop. So today we're going to discuss about what kind of game you're creating, story of your game, theme of your game, and tone of your game. So what kind of game will you be creating? Well, you can either choose a location-based game, indie game, or board game. So location-based game is a type of persuasive game in which the gameplay evolves and progresses via player location. So with modern day games today, it's that it pretty much involves you to move around, to play, and then you can achieve some quests and achieve some things, So I'm not sure why they haven't formed a boot camp game yet for people to play, because people these days are obsessed with gymming and stuff like this. Yes. So I was going to get to that, Ashwill. I was going to get to the examples for location-based game, and you're correct. Pokemon Go and zombie game. I think everyone in this group is familiar with the whole Pokemon game and how it is. And I'm not sure how many people are familiar with the zombie game, but I would highly advise you to try. It's a ridiculous game. It's really, really nice. The first game I actually created was 3 years ago. It was with the Enter Africa. It was called a location-based game where we had to create a game that focuses on the cultural venues of our city. I didn't really like the game. Maybe it was nice to some people, but I didn't like it because it was just not my style of games. That's why when I came up with this workshop, I decided to give people lots of options in which games they would focus on doing. And location-based game was slided in. And one thing about location-based game I'll add is that if you're trying to do an educational game or a tourism game, a location-based game is probably you can probably try and come up with a concept that suits a location-based game. It will be best suited for that. I also think that in our day and age, the fastest way to make money, not make money, but to get companies interested to partner within your project would be to create a location-based game. Imagine if you do a game that involves guest housing and stuff like that. So, or it involves what do you call it, parliament gardens or museums, so this would be your best fit and your best way to approach and use it. Yeah, so that's location-based game. Moving on to the next games are indie games. So just having to find the definition for indie games was a bit difficult for me because I couldn't think of it. But basically, indie games are independent video games. Development is the business of making games without the support of publishers. So indie games are it's like when you create an indie game, no one owns you. It's almost like you're an independent musician. No one owns your right. Everything you do, you own it, So, and examples of indie games are like My Friend Pedro and Catania Zero. I also think I'm not sure how many people have played Contra before, like, I mean, Contra TV game Contra. You know, like back then when we only had TV games before PlayStation game. I think that also falls under indie games. So indie games is a bit, I think it's, I think like, yeah, definitely. I think indie games like location-based games require you to code and do everything. So if you're gonna code an indie game, it might be more complicated than a location-based game, because location-based game is easier. You can find someone to come up with the information, or you can come up with the information yourself. Then the coder can just code what you need to do it. Whereas with an indie game, in you might need a graphics illustrator, you know, or you might have to download characters from the internet, from a free website, just to add into the game. You know, there's so many elements that are involved in it, along with the designing backgrounds as well. So I think it's fair to say that the indie game is more, I would say, more fun to create compared to a location-based game, but it could be more complicated. So the next one are board games. So board games are traditionally a subset of tabletop games that involve counters or pieces moved or placed on a pre-marked surface or board according to a set of rules. So I think I'm almost sure that everyone in this, or everyone around the world, can create a board game. You know, I think they might be, I think to do the format, it's easy, but to always come up with the ideas and concepts for board games are difficult. So you can install Canva, or you can use, basically, to design a board game, you only need a graphics designing app. You know, if you look at the boards, let me just show the examples. Like if you look at the examples of board games, Monopoly, Snakes and Ladders, this is pretty much graphics design work. You know, someone just designed this using Adobe. Okay, sorry, there wasn't Adobe back then, but still, if you would have to like create it, you can possibly use Adobe or Canva, and then just add a few colorings and things, and then you have your board games. So for board games, you don't necessarily need you don't need to code it, you know. I mean, down along the line, you could like create a game in a computer version, like in a format version, in a mobile version, or game format version, but the original style, you can just graphics design it, come up with concepts, and have your own board games. So I don't know what sort of board games you guys like, or what are your favorite board games, but my all-time favorite board game is Monopoly. You know, it's just really nice. I'll check that one out too, Ashwell. So yeah, and put me on to more games. You know, if you guys have like more games that you know of that I haven't heard of, definitely send me like links so I can see where I can get them. So now I've introduced to you guys the type of games that we have. So now we're gonna talk about storyline. So the storyline and the concept of the game decides the tone, theme, and view of the game. So for your game to be appealing to the general public, it needs to have a storyline which connects to the theme and the tone of the game. So I will make an example of the games and stuff. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with Resident Evil. So if you're familiar with Resident Evil, you know for a fact that Resident Evil is a horror game. So if the game is a horror game, it means the tone of the game, it means the tone in general has to be dark. You know, so when you think of it, it's like, okay, so what game is this? Resident Evil? Ah, so like the movie, yeah. So it tells you already the tone of it is dark and the theme of the film is dark. And even with the background music, it has a very dark edge to it. Because imagine if you had like a lighter tone to Resident Evil, it just wouldn't connect with people perfectly, because it has to go with how it goes. It has to like it just has to make sense. An example I can give, I'll give an example outside the gaming world, and we'll talk about comic books, movies. I mean, if you have to compare, let's say the Dark Knight 2008 movie with Joker, Heath Ledger Joker, and Two-Face, and then you have to compare to let's say Avengers, the first Avengers movie. If you compare the two sets of films, the Dark Knight has a much darker tone to it, you know, compared to Avengers that has a much lighter tone to it, you know, and it can be expressed through the colors of the material and the art as well, like when they were advertising the art. So you can see it as well. So if you're gonna like do like, and coming back to gaming now, if you look at FIFA, if you look at FIFA and the colors and how it is if you play it, it has so much of a light tone to it, you know, it's user friendly and it's just a good feeling app. So moving on to the next one, we're going to talk about themes. So the themes is that after you choose a storyline, you need a theme. So after you choose a storyline, the storyline will dictate the theme for the game. So basically, if you're going to work on a dark, you know, on a horror game, it says, okay, so this is going to be a dark film. I'm sorry, a dark game. So the theme for it has to be dark. So you have to code it, not code it, but you have to like do designs or elements that will go with the storylines for it to be for it to make sense. Because at the end of the day, when you're creating a game, you're creating a game that you want for it to be. I'm not going to use the term perfect, but it should flow in a structure that makes sense, you know, that goes everything well. Because imagine like creating a Jeepers Creepers game, but you have like a light theme towards it. It wouldn't sit right with your gamers and your game participants and guys like that. Or it's like when you create what you call it, a game that has to do with with medicine and stuff, and then you try and like add elements that just don't fit with medicine. Like maybe you're creating a medical game and then you add like a sports into it. It just, some elements wouldn't make sense, you know, and it would completely turn off the users. So themes are quite important when you do games. So your game colors or features to your game has to go with the story of your game. So if you design a story, you need a theme that can accompany it so that it can make sense and it can work. So and then now the final part is the tone of your game. So after you have a storyline and after you have a theme, for your game, you now need background music which will accompany the tone of your game. So going back to Resident Evil, if you're gonna work on a Resident Evil game or something within that area, a horror game, you're gonna definitely need background music that's dark, because it would be very perfect if it goes with it. Because trust me, because I've played some mobile games where, you know, it just, something just doesn't sit right, where sometimes for me to enjoy the game, I just had to take off the music because the music didn't accompany the mood of the game that was created. So the tone of your game is important. So I'm aware that a lot of us in the group aren't necessarily how do you call it? We don't really know how to create background music, you know? I mean, as far as that goes, I only know how to mash up music, but I don't know anything about producing and production. And to find guys that will just help you out to create tone of the music is very difficult. So what you guys can do is that, can you guys see my YouTube screen?
YouTube.
Yeah.
No.
Okay, just hold on. Let me just try and share that screen. Window. Okay, how about now?
Nope, nothing. It's coming.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so
Yes.
so I went online and I just searched for no background dark theme music, you know, and I'm gonna play it a bit. And so you can try and like find music that's online that's free to get, that you can just like put it in your game without, I mean, as long as it's not copyrighted, then you just have something like to accompany to your game, which would help you like which would help you like in the future, you know. So yeah, so that's basically what I was going to explain. Oh, so and the other thing I was going to explain as well is that so if you want to create start buttons, and let me just share my screen. Okay, so you guys can see the screen in Canva, right?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
so I'm aware that a lot of developers aren't they aren't what's the word? They aren't graphics designers or graphics illustrators, and we don't have a lot of VFX effects guys either. Although we need them in games, because if you're creating like a fighting game, like let's say Far Cry, you're gonna definitely need someone who can just add some of the effects in when you're creating like fighting or when you're shooting lightning. So an easy way to use if you're like setting up your game is that you can use Canva really easy just to like set up your start buttons, like start option, which should be easy to create. You know, you can always choose what kind of font you want, and you could always get background images on Pixpy if you want, and just put them behind. And even stuff like credits, you can use Canva to do it, because it's free and it's probably the most easiest graphics designing app you'll find out there. Some of us are familiar with Adobe, like some of us use Adobe to do our designs, but for the simple stuff, like if you want something that's fast, you can use Adobe to create it. It makes it so easy and so nice to work with. Okay, so that's what I was going to explain for today. The workshop originally was supposed to be short, but yeah, so if I wanted to make the workshop as short as possible, because I wanted people to ask as much questions as possible. You know, I want people to like turn their microphones on and they can ask any kind of questions they want to. Okay.
Okay. So that's the end.
Yeah. So now it's like I want to like dedicate more time for people to ask questions now, and just pretty much
Okay. So you're suggesting use Canva, given that it's free, for us to like do a wireframe of our game UI in that sense. That's what you're saying.
yeah, and then you can also like pick your colors from Canva. Like if you're doing like what do you call it? A game that let's say a space game, for example. You know, you can find pictures that are free to download from the internet from Pixpy. You know, then you can just add them in the background images of your gameplay, and then once you have them, once you have those images, if there is a, I think if there is a coder, you can give it to the you can like give it to the coder, and the coder can add it into Unity as a background effect, and then it makes the process so easier compared to just having to use Unity templates, which are very familiar, you know, because if most game guys see the most a lot of guys who use Canva, if they see someone created a game, they can almost pick up that, okay, so I know that template, I saw it on Canva. So sorry, not Canva, but Unity. So if you use images, if you use Canva to create some of your background designs, it makes the process so easier. That's if you're like upcoming, you know, like if you're upcoming game guy and you need to do everything yourself.
Okay.
Okay, anyone has questions? Okay, so no questions.
Hello?
Yeah,
Hello?
we can hear
Not
you,
really a
Chubo.
question, but to add on to what you said, that
Yeah.
Canva is a very easy way to make your, let's say, game characters. And even if you use the templates that Canva uses, you can always use your creativity and combine shapes and different things to make the characters. So
Yes,
if you
definitely.
if you can't afford the Photoshops or the big softwares, then Canva is an easy way to do it for game design, including GUI.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Thanks for adding that. And yeah, I feel like this part of 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 a lot of workshops, because I've attended a lot of game workshops, and one thing I've noticed about them is that they never explain like the concept of gaming. Like if you're doing a game, what sort of game or what sort of ideas you should come up with. Because what they do basically is they just get straight into the coding procedure and the other explanations, which makes everything so difficult and you know. So what I was going to suggest is that I think we need to have more workshops that go in depth detail that goes into more depth in depth detail. And so going back to you guys, sorry, I just had an emergency I had to sort out. So going back to it, I think there has to be more workshops where we focus on simply game structures and game designs and storytelling. Because one thing I've noticed is that I've ran into a lot of people that know how to code, that really know how to code games, but then you can see that they're missing elements, and it's almost like when he was creating the game, he didn't add the necessary themes to accompany his game or the storytelling. So it's a nice game, but at the same time it's really confusing. So at the end of the day, you want people to like make not perfect games, but games that move in a that move in a nice flow or in a certain flow.
Okay. Ashwin asked a question.
Okay, go ahead.
He asked, so would we be using Canva more for background rather than actual animation in the games?
I think that's up to you. Oh, so I see it's Ashwell's question. Yes. So it's really up to you what sort of like animation you want to use. I mean, the Canva one is it's for me it would be easier if you're not really familiar with the whole scale. You know, if you're not familiar with how to create backgrounds properly, I would suggest you use Canva to create your own one, because Canva is I would say it's more user friendly compared to Unity if you're creating a background. So you don't necessarily have to use Canva to create background or to create buttons. You could always use Unity or whatever app, but Canva would always be, or in my opinion at least, it's the easier one.
With the game backgrounds, if I may add on, like last week when I showed how to use Inkscape, it was just basic. You can do static game backgrounds in Inkscape as well. And that will be, I think, one of my second last or last workshops that I'll be showing how to do that. So there's a lot of options that you can consider looking at. And like Tutaleni says, he found Canva friendly and user friendly for him. For you, it might be something else might be more user friendly for you. So it depends on what works for you.
Yeah. So do we have more? Oh, and I was gonna add. I think I was gonna add something. I just forgot what I wanted to add now. I was gonna add and say that I think when you also when you do your backgrounds, yeah. Next question. I forgot what I was gonna say. I'll maybe remember it soon.
It'll come to you again. Okay. So we're waiting for him to ask something.
Okay. So, okay. Okay, so I think Chubo added something. Yeah, he said ideally Unity should be used to put all elements together. So most of the game design should be done on a graphics design like Canva or Shop. Yeah, he is correct.
Yes.
Okay, so anyone has anything to add or any experiences to share? In creating, I'll go first and explain the first time I was involved in a game procedure. It was around actually the first game like I did was I think it was a board game. So we had to like come up with ideas and concept, and it was we worked with we were like 14, so we ended up creating a board game that was made out of shapes and everything. So yeah, it was really fun, but it was so confusing because prior to that, I never had any experience in any game development or stuff like that. So, and as far as on a coding level is concerned, I don't really like to code. I find it boring. That's why I do a lot of the work with Chubo. You know, he finds coding exciting. I really don't. I prefer to like do design background images and start patterns and rather create the game concept and game type. So but I think it's more easier if you're in a country where gaming is supported to find people who can like do everything, who you can like find everyone to do in each department. For us here in Namibia, it's quite difficult because there isn't really a lot of us, so we pretty much have to train ourselves or familiarize ourselves with most of the programs just to like have something ready. Okay, Rondisha, were you gonna add something to it, or should we?
Uh, um, yeah. Mm, yeah, I also like coding more than design. Although that's a thing I need to work with someone that's design, has a bit of design talent. Because then only I'll be able to finish my games. Because I can do what they call it, the layout of the game I want it to be, and what component I want it to, what to have in the game. But like I mentioned, the Pac-Man style game I had in mind that I started, it's more like a, it's like more like a maze. So you could say 75% finished. The only thing that's not there is sound. I always leave sound for the last minute. It's like the last thing I think whenever I'm doing a game. And my game, the only thing lacks is what's this, cool graphics. Let's put it that way. To make it
Okay,
attractive for someone to consider, let's download the game and play it. That's the only thing that my game lacks. That's what I feel.
yeah, I agree. Definitely. So the aim of today's workshop was to try and make it as short as possible, so that people could have more questions to ask. You know, because when it comes to the whole storytelling and game concept, I'm not sure if we can make it longer, if it can be a longer workshop or not, because it's pretty much just it's just giving basic knowledge about certain things you need so that you can make sure your game goes smoothly or better. Okay, so if there won't be any questions, okay, questions. Okay, so the question here is when designing board games on Canva, how does printing work for board games designed on Canva? So it's easy, you know. So when it's the same as it's the same as printing out papers. You know, you print out a paper, or no. Wait, sorry. It's not actually as simple as it sounds. So basically, once you're like done creating the game, like once you're done designing the whole process, you have to go to what you call it. You have to go to a printing company, and then you have to share with them the dimensions. So it's very important. Like you have to share them the dimensions and the angles of your board game, as well as your cards as well. If you're gonna have cards involved, you need to like have like like a measurement on how small or how big your cards will be, and then they have to print it out. So as long as you can show them like the as long as you can show them the whole procedure on how everything is going to work, they can print it out and then they can have it to you on a board. So I never thought of it until I think recently when I went to a shop and I printed out my business card. Because when I printed out my business card, I felt it, and I felt my board game, and I was like, the material is almost the same. So the only difference is perhaps the design that's painted onto it. So I think it makes things easier. Like we don't have companies in Namibia that actually do printing, but when I did speak to some of the other guys, they did say that it is possible to have it printed out.
But printing board games are not cheap, at least not cheap in South Africa.
No, they're not.
When we had our first game dev meetup in Durban, a few of us, like about 8 of us, showed up. One of the guys, he actually had a completed board game done. He created his own board game, and he was telling us about his experience and the fact that he found it difficult to at least print one game, complete game to sell or to give to somebody, and it costed him like maybe over 1,000 or more here in
Yeah,
SA, but he
definitely.
could cost him much less when he went overseas, or I'm not sure which country it was. And that is why board games now, if you see the price of board games, $8.99, $7.99, no one would generally want to buy. But then you don't consider the fact how much one puts into not just making that board game, the idea that they got out of it, but printing costs more than actually making the game yourself.
Exactly. Yeah, I was gonna add that. I was gonna add and say that um, if you guys are like me and you aim to like have board games and you aim to pursue it, I mean, if you somehow, and I mean just somehow, manage to get sponsors, someone to sponsor you, to say, hey, I want to sponsor your board game, I think it would be wise to tell them to sponsor you the machine where you can actually print it out. Then just tell them to like sponsor you to like print the boards out. Because once he sponsors you the machine, um, I think you could find someone who could perhaps teach you how to like print it out and everything, which shouldn't be a difficult process or prospect. And once you do that, you can pretty much control how much money you make or not. Because I'm very aware that board games are very expensive. Because I mean, there's the cards as well that you have to print out. Let's look at Monopoly for instance. I mean, there's money that you have to print out. That's a price of its own, different types of money. Then there's the cards again, and then there's the entire board game. So yeah, no, board games are definitely expensive. We don't have any official companies in Namibia that do print, but we do have companies that are open to the idea of printing. But the prices are very tricky. Okay. So I think we should, any more questions or should we wrap up? Okay. So it'd be easier to have a board game concept and do the printed side of it. Let me just look at the question. Chat. Okay. So I think someone asked a question. So would it be easier to have the board game concept and do the printed side of it first before actually creating the game using Unity? I'm not sure. I think it depends how you want it to be, how you want to like. It depends how fast you can make your profits. You know, I mean, if Monopoly was to be created through Unity first, before the whole process, would they make that money? I think generally with board game concepts, I think you can create it using Unity. Once it's done, it's always nice to just go to companies and do your research and find out how much would they actually be willing to pay for it. You know, if they're willing to pay for it, then you can work out how much you're willing to sell it for, so that you can really like make a profit out of it, and not how do you call it, and not just make break even profits, but make actual profits. Actually, if you want, I could turn your mic on and you could ask me like a proper question, because I don't think I've quite answered your question. Okay. Okay, cool. I got it. So any more questions before we wrap up? Okay. Okay, I understand. Background noise, definitely. Okay. So anyway, any more questions, guys, before I wrap up? So no more questions. We're done. Okay, so I was going to add and say that I think in the future we might end up starting a WhatsApp group, just to make the communication a lot more easier, because I've noticed that some people struggle to read their emails, you know, or their emails don't get in time. So perhaps developing a WhatsApp group would be easier, you know, just to share information and to create a community among ourselves. Okay, so yeah, so everyone should just drop their numbers into the WhatsApp, I mean, into the chat area. Then we can use that then we can start a group where it's easier for upcoming workshops for people to attend.
So in case.
Okay. And as far as certificates are concerned, I think we'll have your certificates ready when the workshop is done, like different certificates for all the workshops you've attended. So, okay, guys, thank you for being part of this. I'm happy that I was able to have this workshop. It's my first ever online workshop I've ever held. Usually I'm familiar with just doing workshops face to face, which is much more easier than online. But due to COVID and due to most of us staying in different countries, this was the preferred route. So thanks for coming in, guys, and see you. Bye. Okay.
This